Hell's Angels spend every Christmas alone, until a single mother and her little girl knocked. Christmas Eve in Redding, California arrived with the kind of cold that settled deep into your bones, the temperature dropping to the low 40s as the sun disappeared behind the mountains that ringed the city. Storm clouds had been gathering all afternoon, thick and gray and pregnant with rain, casting the entire town in an eerie twilight even though it was only 5 in the evening. A biting wind whipped through the streets, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke from countless fireplaces and the promise of precipitation before morning. Most sensible people were already indoors with their families, preparing Christmas Eve dinners, watching children's excitement build to a fever pitch, enjoying the warmth and comfort of togetherness that defined this particular holiday. But Marcus Granite Stone wasn't with his family. He didn't have family anymore, at least, not the biological kind. The brothers in his motorcycle club, the Hells Angels Redding chapter, were his family now, had been for over 30 years. But even they had mostly dispersed hours ago, heading to their various celebrations with wives, children, grandchildren, leaving Granite alone in the clubhouse as darkness fell and the temperature continued to drop. Granite was 56 years old, though he looked older. The hard living of his younger years and the grief of his later ones had etched deep lines into his face. He stood 6 feet 1 inch, solid and muscular despite his age, the kind of build that came from decades of construction work and dedicated gym time. His hair, what remained of it, was iron gray and pulled back in a short ponytail that reached just past his collar. His full beard, also gray with streaks of white, reached mid-chest, and he kept it meticulously groomed, one of the few vanities he still maintained. His arms were covered in tattoos documenting his life, each one a story, a memory, a tribute. The Hells Angels' death head was prominently displayed on his right bicep, the colors still vibrant despite being over 3 decades old. Names of fallen brothers were memorialized in Gothic script running down his forearms. Tommy, died in a motorcycle accident in 1998, Jake, murdered in a bar fight in 2004, Reaper, succumbed to cancer in 2011, Bear, heart attack in 2016. On his left shoulder was a detailed rendering of a motorcycle with angel wings, a tribute to the brothers who'd ridden off into the sunset. And there, over his heart, was the most important tattoo of all, a photorealistic image of his late wife Sarah's face, her smile captured forever in ink, with her name underneath and the dates, 1963 to 2017. He wore his leather vest with the same pride he'd worn it for 30 years, the patches telling the story of his life in the Brotherhood. The main colors patch on the back, the death head with Hell's Angels arched above and Redding below, was the centerpiece. On the front, various patches documented his journey, original member indicating he'd been one of the founding members of the Redding chapter, secretary showing his current role in the chapter hierarchy, 1%er, the controversial patch indicating membership in the outlaw motorcycle culture, and several memorial patches for fallen brothers. He wore this vest over a black t-shirt despite the cold, refusing to cover the patches with a jacket even in this weather. The clubhouse itself was a modest building on the outskirts of Redding, a former warehouse that the chapter had purchased and renovated in the early 1990s. From the outside, it was intentionally nondescript, gray cinder block walls, no windows except for a few small ones up high, a heavy steel door with multiple locks, and a large garage door for the motorcycles. The only indication of what the building housed was a small sign near the door reading, "Private Club, Members Only," and the security cameras mounted at various angles. Inside, however, the clubhouse was comfortable and well-maintained. The main room was large and open, with a polished concrete floor, exposed beam ceiling, and walls decorated with motorcycle memorabilia, photographs of runs and rallies, and framed newspaper articles about the chapter's various charitable activities. There was a long bar along one wall, fully stocked, with a dozen bar stools. A pool table occupied one corner, a dartboard another. Comfortable leather couches and chairs were arranged in conversation areas throughout the space. A large flat-screen TV mounted on one wall was usually tuned to sports or news. In the far corner, somewhat incongruously given the masculine aesthetic of the rest of the space, stood a Christmas tree. It was a real tree, about 7 feet tall, decorated with a mix of traditional ornaments and motorcycle-themed decorations, tiny Harleys, miniature leather jackets, small death head replicas. White lights twinkled among the branches, and a silver star topped the tree. Wrapped presents were arranged beneath it, gifts that would be distributed at the chapter's post-Christmas party when all the brothers returned from their family obligations. The tree had been put up by some of the younger members who still had families to go home to, children waiting for Santa, wives preparing Christmas dinners. They'd insisted on decorating the clubhouse, wanting to bring some holiday cheer to their second home. Most of the chapter had dispersed hours ago, heading to their various celebrations, Wrench to his wife and 3 kids in their suburban home, Nomad to his daughter's house where he'd play with his grandchildren, Tank to his new girlfriend's family dinner where he'd be politely intimidating. They'd all invited Granite to join them, of course. The brotherhood took care of its own, and nobody wanted to see a brother spend Christmas alone. But Granite had declined every invitation, as he did every year. He couldn't bear to see the happy families, the children opening presents with squeals of delight, the normalcy of a holiday he'd never experience in that way again. It was easier to be alone, to drink a few beers, maybe watch some TV, and wait for December 26th when life could go back to normal and he could stop pretending that this particular day didn't tear open old wounds that never quite healed. Sarah had died 8 years ago, on December 27, 2017. Breast cancer. Stage 4. By the time they'd caught it, metastasized to her lymph nodes, her liver, her bones. They'd fought it for 18 brutal months, chemotherapy that made her violently ill, radiation that burned her skin, experimental treatments that cost a fortune and provided only marginal benefits. Granite had watched his vibrant, beautiful wife waste away, her body betraying her cell by cell, day by day. He'd held her hand through every treatment, slept in a chair beside her hospital bed during her numerous admissions, researched alternative therapies obsessively, prayed to a God he wasn't sure he believed in. Their last Christmas together had been bittersweet. Sarah was in hospice by then, everyone knowing the end was near but trying to make the holiday special anyway. The brothers had come by on Christmas Day with gifts and food, trying to bring cheer but mostly just reminding both Granite and Sarah of how much was about to be lost. Sarah had been so weak she could barely open her presents, but she'd smiled and thanked everyone, ever gracious even as death approached. 2 days later, at 3:47 a.m. on December 27th, with Granite holding her hand and whispering that he loved her, Sarah had taken her last breath and simply stopped. The silence that followed was the loudest sound Granite had ever heard. They'd never had children. Sarah couldn't, endometriosis had rendered her infertile in her 20s, long before she'd met Granite. They'd discussed adoption or fostering, but Sarah's illness had come before they'd made any concrete plans, and then it was too late. Granite's parents were long dead, his father from a heart attack when Granite was 30, his mother from a stroke 5 years later. Both his brothers had been killed in separate motorcycle accidents years apart, Michael in 2003, David in 2009. Sarah's family had never approved of her marriage to a Hell's Angel, viewing Granite as a dangerous criminal who'd corrupted their sweet daughter. After she died, they'd cut off all contact, as if Granite had somehow been responsible for the cancer that took her, as if his love hadn't been enough to save her. So for the past 8 years, Granite had spent every Christmas alone. Other brothers invited him to their homes, of course, the brotherhood took care of its own. But Granite always declined. He couldn't bear to see the happy families, the children opening presents, the normalcy of a holiday he'd never experience in that way again. It was easier to be alone, to drink a few beers, maybe watch some TV, and wait for December 26th when life could go back to normal. He'd been sitting in the clubhouse for about 3 hours now, working on his 4th beer of the evening. The TV was on but muted, showing some Christmas special he wasn't really watching. The Christmas tree lights blinked rhythmically, casting colored shadows across the room. The wood-burning stove in the corner kept the space comfortably warm, crackling occasionally as logs settled. Outside, the wind howled and rain had started to fall, fat drops that splattered against the few high windows. Granite was deep in his memories, thinking about the Christmas Sarah had made homemade cookies shaped like motorcycles, when he heard it, a timid knock on the front door. He frowned, setting down his beer and listening intently. Nobody knocked on the clubhouse door on Christmas Eve. Hell, nobody knocked on the clubhouse door period. Brothers just walked in with their keys, and strangers knew better than to approach the Hells Angels clubhouse uninvited. The security cameras and the building's forbidding appearance usually kept curious civilians away. The knock came again, slightly more insistent this time, and Granite could hear voices, female voices, he thought, though it was hard to tell over the wind. Granite stood up, his joints protesting slightly after hours of sitting, and walked to the door. Next to the door was a small monitor showing feeds from the security cameras. He looked at the screen showing the front entrance, and what he saw made him pause. A woman stood on the doorstep, maybe in her late 20s, getting soaked by the rain that was now coming down steadily. She had long dark hair pulled into a messy ponytail that was plastered to her head and neck. She wore a thin denim jacket that was clearly inadequate for the cold and wet weather, jeans that looked worn and old, and sneakers that were probably soaked through. One arm was wrapped around herself in a futile attempt to stay warm, while the other hand held that of a little girl. The child was probably 5 or 6 years old, with the same dark hair as her mother, wearing what appeared to be a princess costume, a sparkly blue dress that resembled something out of a Disney movie, over regular clothes. She had a thin coat over the costume that was doing nothing to protect her from the elements. Both mother and daughter were shivering visibly, their breath forming clouds in the cold air. The woman raised her hand to knock again, hesitated, then did so anyway, more urgently this time. Even through the camera, Granite could see the desperation on her face, the fear mixed with hope, the body language of someone who had no other options. The little girl looked up at the door as if she could somehow sense him watching, and the hope in her young eyes hit Granite like a punch to the gut. Granite's first instinct was to ignore them. Whatever they wanted, it wasn't his problem. He'd done his good deeds for the year. The chapter's toy run at Christmas had collected over 500 toys for underprivileged kids, they'd done a Thanksgiving dinner for homeless veterans, they'd helped rebuild a house for a family whose home had burned down. He'd contributed his time and money to all of it. Surely he was entitled to his solitary grief on Christmas Eve without strangers knocking on his door asking for who knows what. But then the little girl looked up at the door again, as if she could somehow sense him watching, and the hope in her eyes, pure, innocent, trusting hope, reminded him of something Sarah used to say, the measure of a man isn't what he does when people are watching, it's what he does when nobody would know if he walked away. And standing there, watching this desperate mother and shivering child on his security monitor, Granite knew Sarah would have opened the door without hesitation. Hell, she would have had them inside, dried off, fed, and comfortable within 10 minutes. With a sigh that was part resignation and part something else he couldn't quite name, Granite unlocked the multiple deadbolts on the door and pulled it open. The cold wind immediately rushed in, bringing with it the smell of rain and the sound of the storm. The woman jumped slightly, clearly startled by his sudden appearance, her eyes going wide as she took in his appearance. And Granite understood her reaction. He was a large, intimidating man on his best day, tonight, wearing his full Hell's Angels colors, his tattooed arms visible, his size filling the doorway, his expression probably not particularly welcoming after hours of solitary drinking and brooding, he probably looked downright terrifying. The woman took an involuntary step backward, pulling her daughter closer, her free hand instinctively moving to a protective position in front of the child. I'm so sorry to bother you, she stammered, her voice shaking from cold or fear or both. The words came out in a rush, tumbling over each other in her haste to explain before he could slam the door in their faces. But we're in trouble, and I didn't know where else to go. I saw your building had lights on, and I thought. I hoped, maybe someone could help us. Please. We're not trying to cause any problems. We just need. What kind of trouble? Granite interrupted, his voice coming out gruffer than he intended. Years of rarely using gentle tones had left his voice perpetually rough, something Sarah used to tease him about, saying he sounded like he'd gargled gravel. He watched the woman flinch slightly at his tone and tried to soften his expression, though he wasn't sure how successful he was. The woman glanced down at her daughter, clearly debating how much to reveal, then looked back at Granite with eyes that held exhaustion, fear, and desperate hope. Our car broke down about 2 miles from here. The engine just died, and it won't start again. We were trying to get to my sister's house in Reading for Christmas, but we don't have money for a tow truck or a motel or anything really. I tried calling her, but her phone goes straight to voicemail. I think she might be out of town and forgot to tell me, or maybe her phone died, I don't know. We've been walking for over an hour, looking for somewhere warm to wait until morning when maybe I can figure something out, find someone who can help, I don't know. She was rambling now, the words spilling out faster as she tried to explain, to justify why she was standing on a Hells Angels clubhouse doorstep on Christmas Eve asking for help from a stranger who looked like he could break her in half without effort. We passed several places, but they were all closed or dark, and honestly most of them looked, I don't know, not safe. But your building had lights on, and I could hear music earlier, so I thought maybe someone was here who could let us use a phone or maybe tell us where we could wait that would be safe and warm. And I know this is probably weird, a woman and a kid knocking on your door, but I swear we're not dangerous or anything, we just really need help. Mommy's phone died too, the little girl added helpfully, her small voice barely audible over the wind and rain. She was shivering so hard her teeth were chattering, and even in the dim light from the doorway, Granite could see her lips had a slight blue tinge. And I'm really, really cold. My feet are wet and my dress is getting ruined and I just want to be warm. There was a heartbreaking matter-of-factness to her statement, as if she was used to things going wrong and just accepted it as normal. Granite looked at them, this desperate mother and shivering child on his doorstep on Christmas Eve, soaked to the bone, clearly at the end of their rope, and felt something shift in his chest. Something that had been locked away for 8 years, something he'd thought died with Sarah, cracked open just a little bit. He thought about what Sarah would do in this situation, and he knew the answer immediately. She'd have them inside before they could finish explaining. Come inside, Granite said, stepping aside and gesturing them in. It's warmer in here, and you can't stand out there in that storm. Come on. The woman hesitated, uncertainty clear on her face. She was being asked to bring her daughter into a motorcycle clubhouse with a stranger who looked like a nightmare come to life. Every maternal instinct had to be screaming at her that this was dangerous, that she should keep walking, find somewhere else. Granite understood her hesitation and tried to reassure her. I promise you're safe here. I'm not going to hurt you or your kid. But it's too cold for her to be standing out there getting soaked, and it's Christmas Eve, nobody should be out in this weather with nowhere to go. Come in, warm up, dry off, and we'll figure out what to do about your car and getting you where you need to go. He softened his voice as much as he could, trying to sound less threatening. My name's Marcus, but everyone calls me Granite. I'm just a guy spending Christmas Eve alone, and honestly, you two showing up might be the most interesting thing that's happened to me all day. Come on, get out of that rain. The little girl tugged on her mother's hand insistently. Mommy, please. I'm so cold, and he seems nice, and look, there's a Christmas tree inside. I can see it. She was pointing past Granite into the clubhouse where the decorated tree was visible, its lights twinkling invitingly. The mother looked down at her daughter's pleading face, then back at Granite, clearly still uncertain but running out of options. Okay, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. We'll just warm up for a bit and then we'll get out of your way. She and the little girl stepped inside, and Granite closed the door behind them, shutting out the cold wind and driving rain. The sudden silence was almost deafening after the noise of the storm. The clubhouse was warm, heated by the wood-burning stove in the corner that kept the place comfortable even on the coldest nights. The little girl immediately moved toward the stove, holding her small hands out to warm them, practically standing in front of it despite her mother's gentle warning to not get too close. Water dripped from their soaked clothes onto the concrete floor, forming small puddles. Hold on, Granite said, walking to a storage closet near the back of the room. He pulled out several thick towels, the clubhouse always kept extras for brothers who got caught in the rain while riding, and brought them over to the mother and daughter. Here, dry off. And take off those wet shoes before you catch pneumonia. The woman accepted the towels gratefully, helping her daughter out of the soaked coat and beginning to dry the child's hair and face. I'm Granite, he said again, introducing himself properly now that they were inside. What's your name? I'm Christina. Christina Ramirez. And this is my daughter, Sophia, the woman replied, her defenses beginning to lower slightly as she realized they truly seemed to be safe, that this intimidating biker wasn't showing any signs of aggression or ill intent. She wrapped a towel around Sophia, rubbing her arms vigorously to warm her up. Pretty names. Both of you, Granite said, trying to make conversation to put them more at ease. He wasn't good at small talk, never had been, but he was trying. He gestured to the couch nearest the stove. Sit down, get comfortable. Let me get you something hot to drink. Coffee? Hot chocolate? Hot chocolate. Sophia said immediately, her face lighting up at the prospect. Then she looked at her mother uncertainly, as if remembering they shouldn't impose. If it's okay, I mean. If it's not too much trouble. It's no trouble at all, Granite assured her. I was just sitting here alone feeling sorry for myself anyway. Making hot chocolate for a princess is a much better way to spend Christmas Eve. He gestured to her costume, which was still visible under her now removed coat. Speaking of which, why are you wearing a princess dress? Is it a Christmas present? Sophia looked down at her costume, a sparkly blue dress with silver accents that did indeed resemble something a Disney princess might wear. Despite being soaked and bedraggled, the child's face lit up when talking about it. It's my Christmas present from Mommy. She gave it to me early because I was really sad that we couldn't afford a real Christmas this year, no tree, no presents, no special dinner or anything. Mommy saved up her tips from working at the diner and bought me this dress because she knows I love princesses. She said even when things are hard, we can still have magic if we believe in it. So I've been wearing my dress because it makes me feel like a princess even when everything else is difficult. The simple honesty of the child's statement, the unconscious revelation of their financial struggles, hit Granite harder than he expected. This family was clearly struggling, probably barely making ends meet, and the mother had spent her hard-earned tip money to buy her daughter a costume dress as an early present to bring some joy into what was obviously a difficult situation. The fact that Sophia was wearing it now, in the rain, walking along a highway on Christmas Eve, spoke volumes about how much that dress meant to her. Well, you look like a real princess to me, Granite said gently, his voice rougher than usual with unexpected emotion. A very brave princess who's been on quite an adventure tonight. Sophia beamed at him, and Christina's eyes filled with grateful tears. Granite went to the small kitchen area, really just a kitchenette with a sink, microwave, small refrigerator, and a hot plate, and busied himself making hot chocolate. The clubhouse kept supplies for making coffee and simple food, and fortunately someone had left a box of hot chocolate mix in the cupboard. As the water heated, he found himself glancing over at Christina and Sophia, watching as they continued to warm up and dry off. Now that they were inside under better light and beginning to relax, Granite could see more details. Christina was probably in her late 20s, with a kind face that showed signs of stress and exhaustion. Her dark hair, once it dried a bit, fell in soft waves past her shoulders. She had warm brown eyes that kept darting around the clubhouse, still wary despite his hospitality. Her clothes, while clean, were clearly worn and old. The jeans had been patched multiple times, the jacket was fraying at the cuffs, and her sneakers had seen better days. Sophia was a miniature version of her mother, with the same dark hair and brown eyes, but with a sweetness and innocence that her circumstances hadn't yet stolen. She couldn't be more than 5 or 6 years old, small for her age, with delicate features and the kind of earnest expression that children wear when they're trying hard to be good. The princess dress, despite its current bedraggled state, was clearly her prized possession, and she kept smoothing it out carefully, trying to preserve it. When the hot chocolate was ready, Granite brought 2 steaming mugs to them. He'd found some mini marshmallows in the cupboard and added extra to Sophia's, figuring every kid liked marshmallows. Sophia's eyes went wide when she saw the mountain of marshmallows floating in her mug. Is this all for me? She asked in wonder, as if she'd never been given something so extravagant. All for you, princess, Granite confirmed. Be careful though, it's hot. Blow on it first. He handed the second mug to Christina, who accepted it with trembling hands. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. You have no idea what this means to us. We've been walking in that storm for so long, and Sophia was getting so cold, and I was starting to panic because I didn't know what to do. Granite pulled up a chair across from them, giving them space but wanting to talk, to understand their situation better. So tell me what happened. Your car broke down, you said? What kind of car? Christina took a sip of her hot chocolate, seeming to gather her thoughts and her courage. It's a 2005 Honda Civic. I bought it used 3 years ago for $1,500. It was all I could afford. It's been okay mostly, but it's old and it has problems sometimes. Today we were driving from Sacramento to Redding, that's about 160 miles, to spend Christmas with my sister Carla and her family. She paused, taking another sip, and Granite could see tears forming in her eyes. Carla invited us 2 weeks ago. She has a real house, a husband, 2 kids, the whole normal family thing. Sophia was so excited. She's never really had a normal Christmas with aunts and uncles and cousins and a big dinner and everything. I saved up money for gas and a small gift to bring, and we left this morning. Everything was fine until we were about 30 miles south of here. The car started making this horrible grinding noise, and then it just died. Just stopped running. I managed to coast it to the side of the highway, and a trucker stopped and helped us push it to an exit ramp so we wouldn't be on the actual highway in danger. Did he help you any further than that? Granite asked. No, he said he had a delivery schedule to keep and couldn't wait with us. He gave me $10 and wished us luck, which was kind of him I suppose, Christina said without bitterness. I tried to call Carla, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I've called probably 20 times, and it's the same every time. Either she's out of cell range, or her phone died, or I don't know. Maybe she forgot we were coming and went somewhere else for Christmas. We're not that close, honestly. This invitation was kind of out of the blue.